Let's get into the easiest schedule for running backs for the fantasy playoffs. The number one easiest schedule for the running back position for the duration of the fantasy playoffs is the Detroit Lions. The Lions in week 15, they play the Bills, who are the second easiest matchup for running backs. The Bears are the seventh easiest running back matchup for running backs in week 16. And then the fantasy championship, they get the 49ers, who are kind of like a middle of the pack. But you know what? The 49ers at that point, they're probably going to be eliminated. They've been stacking up injury after injury after injury on both sides of the football. They might be packed up and ready to end the season at that point in week 17. And even at this point, they're already just middle of the pack anyway. They're not a tough enough matchup or an easy matchup. You can play your running backs in week 17. You can play your Lions running backs against the 49ers. So obviously we are taking advantage of this Lions schedule with Jahmyr Gibbs. This is a guy who doesn't need the backfield to himself to put up top 10 fantasy numbers. He's currently RB6 in fantasy points per game. He's averaging 18.1 points per game. And that was after being the RB8 as a rookie last year. So Jahmyr Gibbs is good. Jahmyr Gibbs is going to trend towards being a league winner. This is a fantastic schedule for him in the fantasy playoffs. And of course, his running back mate, David Montgomery. He's also a top 12 running back in fantasy points per game. He scored 11 touchdowns in 12 games. This guy doesn't know how to not score touchdowns. And he's also on his way to another 1,000-yard rushing season. So fire up Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery. Play him in the fantasy playoffs. You don't need me to tell you that. But if you have those guys, you got to be excited for the fantasy playoffs. Now, the second easiest schedule in the fantasy playoffs for the running back position are the Cardinals. So they get the Patriots in week 15. They're the 12th easiest matchup for the running back position. And then we talked about the Panthers in week 16. The Panthers are the easiest matchup for the running back position. You want to play all your running backs against the Panthers. So in the semifinals, you're going to want to fire up James Conner for sure. Then in the fantasy championship week 17, it's the Rams, who are the 14th easiest matchup for the running back position. So obviously we're taking advantage of this with James Conner. He's one of the most consistent players at the running back position. He's top 15 in carries and in targets among running backs. And he's the RB17 in fantasy points per game. Now, the Cardinals should get out to a lead against both the Panthers and the Patriots, which will likely turn into a very James Conner-friendly game script in both of those matchups. If you have James Conner, dude just got paid. He's playing well. He somehow has stayed healthy. If that maintains throughout the rest of the year, he's going to be a big contributor to you winning a fantasy championship. Now, we know the injury history of James Conner. He has literally never played more than 15 games in a season. He's only played more than 13 games in a single season one time in his career. So that means we still need to be stashing Trey Benson. Trey Benson is one of the top handcuff running backs in fantasy football. He would be a league winner with this schedule. If anything were to happen to James Conner, you must stash Trey Benson for the fantasy playoffs. He could be a league winner at any moment if anything happens to James Conner. Fantastic schedule, great player, third-round pick, explosive, big running back. Stash Trey Benson. The third easiest schedule for the running back position is the New York Jets. They get the Jaguars with the third easiest matchup for the running back position in week 15. It's the Rams in week 16, and it's the Bills in week 17. The Bills are the second easiest matchup for the running back position. Take advantage of this with Breece Hall. Breece Hall he's kind of been up and down throughout the year. That's pretty much thanks to what has been mostly a dysfunctional Jets offense. However, Breece Hall is fully equipped to absolutely torch bottom of the league run defenses if given the chance. Now we know he's battling a little bit of a knee injury right now. He didn't really look right in week 13. That means we need to keep Braylon Allen stashed on our bench just in case, because if he becomes the number one running back in that offense, he has that same easy schedule, guys. He's got the same easy schedule that Breece Hall does. He could be a league winner if he was thrust into that RB1 job. So keep Braylon Allen stashed. The fourth easiest schedule for the running back position are the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Week 15, they get the Chargers, who are the 19th easiest schedule or opponent. Cowboys in week 16. And then there it is again, the Panthers, who are the easiest matchup for the running back position. They get the Panthers in week 17. Fire up Bucky Irving. Fire up Rachaad White for the fantasy championship. Bucky Irving, he's kind of emerged as the number one guy in this two-headed Bucs backfield. He's even started to take a good chunk of the receiving work away from Rachaad White. That's a concern for Rachaad White owners, but it's great for Bucky Irving managers. Rachaad White came into the league as a great pass-catching running back. That's what he does best. That's his bread and butter. He's done well with that in the NFL. So Bucky Irving is also starting to eat into that work. We could, with this schedule, we could get league winner Bucky Irving. So make sure you are firing up Bucky Irving with confidence throughout the fantasy playoffs. He could be that guy that you need on your fantasy championship roster to win it all in week 17. Now, I do believe Rachaad White is still going to get enough work to be like a weekly RB3. And if anything happens to Bucky Irving, he's going to thrive. So keep stashing. And maybe in certain situations, you can start Rachaad White. Now, there's a third guy in that backfield. It's Sean Tucker. He's kind of an interesting stash in deeper leagues just in case something happens to Bucky Irving or Rachaad White. He would have a role in that backfield if either of those guys were to go down. The fifth easiest fantasy playoff schedule for the running back position are the Tennessee Titans. Week 15, they get the Bengals, who are kind of, they're kind of an okay matchup. They're more of a pass funnel defense than, a great matchup for running backs. But I'm not hesitating to play my running backs against the Bengals, but it gets easier from there. Week 16, it's the Colts for the fifth easiest matchup for the running back position. Then in the fantasy championship round, week 17, it's the Jaguars, who have the third easiest matchup for running backs. So we're going to take advantage of this with Tony Pollard. Tony Pollard, he's kind of become a little bit game script dependent, as we kind of saw there in week 13. But the Titans should play it pretty close against the Colts and the Jaguars in week 16 and week 17. So there should be plenty of opportunities for him to exploit two of the bottom five defenses against a running back position. I'm going to keep riding Tony Pollard with confidence through the fantasy playoffs. I think he could help you, especially in the semifinals and the finals, help you win that championship. Let's move on to the wide receiver position, the easiest schedule in the fantasy playoffs for wide receivers. That goes to the Las Vegas Raiders. They have the easiest schedule for wide receivers. Week 15 is it's the Falcons, who are the fourth easiest matchup for the wide receiver position. Week 16, it's the Jaguars, who are the third easiest matchup for the wide receiver position. And then week 17, fantasy championship week, it is the Saints, who are the 11th easiest matchup for the wide receiver position. Now, of course, there's not a lot to take advantage of in Las Vegas, but I do like me some Jacoby Myers at the wide receiver position. He's really the only Raiders wide receiver worth rostering, because we know Brock Bowers is a tight end. Myers is quietly wide receiver 19 in fantasy points per game. He's scored at least 13 PPR points in 6 of his last 8 games without Devontae Adams in the lineup. He's seen at least 10 targets in 4 of his last 7 games. Obviously, we can translate this over to Brock Bowers as well, but you don't need me to tell you, fire up Brock Bowers with confidence, no matter what. But the schedule will help Brock Bowers as well. The second easiest schedule in the fantasy playoffs for the wide receiver position are the New York Giants. Week 15 is the Ravens, who are the third easiest matchup for wide receivers. A lot of that is game script. Their secondary is not great, but their run defense is really, really good. And their offense is really, really good. So opponents are forced to throw the ball a lot against the Ravens, which of course is going to help wide receivers score more fantasy points. That could be the case here for the Giants in week 15, especially if we have Drew Lock at quarterback. I feel a lot better about it. He's going to start in week 14, so hopefully he'll continue to play throughout the fantasy playoffs as well. Because week 16 is the Falcons, who are the fourth easiest matchup for the wide receiver position, and the Colts, who are the 15th easiest matchup for the wide receiver position. Giants get them in the fantasy championship week. So obviously we're only taking advantage of this with Malik Neighbors. I have really very little interest in Wan'Dale Robinson or even a deeper guy like Darius Slayton. I just want Malik Neighbors. I don't think any quarterback, no matter who it is, whether it was Daniel Jones earlier in the year, whether it's Drew Lock, Tommy DeVito, I don't think there's really a Giants quarterback who can support consistently at a high level more than one wide receiver for fantasy purposes right now. So we're just going to focus on Malik Neighbors. Malik Neighbors continues to just get peppered with targets, no matter who is out there throwing the football. He's third among wide receivers in targets. He's first in target share. He's fourth in receptions. And he's still wide receiver 8 in fantasy points per game. And the third easiest schedule for the wide receiver position in the fantasy playoffs are the Tennessee Titans. It's the Bengals in week 15. They are the fifth easiest matchup for wide receivers. Week 16 is the Colts, who are the 15th easiest matchup for wide receivers. And then in the fantasy championship week, the Titans get the Jaguars. They are the second easiest matchup for wide receivers. Take advantage with Calvin Ridley. Calvin Ridley has 2 top 5 weeks and 4 top 30 weeks in the 6 games since DeAndre Hopkins was traded. He's been awfully close to a few more big plays along the way as well. And we can also look towards Nick Westbrook-Ikhine. He has seen a target share of at least 20% in 3 straight games. He's been a touchdown machine. The dude doesn't know how to not score touchdowns at this point. Now, I know touchdown regression is definitely going to hit Nick Westbrook-Ikhine eventually, but he's going to remain relevant as long as those targets keep on coming. The target shares have been there. So we got to keep looking at Nick Westbrook-Ikhine. That's a really great schedule for the fantasy playoffs. The fourth easiest schedule in the fantasy playoffs for the wide receiver position are the Chicago Bears. Week 15, they get the number 1 easiest matchup for wide receivers. That is the Vikings. We talked about them earlier. They are a pass funnel defense. There are a lot of reasons for it. In week 16 is the Lions. Same thing. They're the 7th easiest matchup for wide receivers. Week 17, it's the Seahawks, who are kind of like middle of the pack there, 17th. But we can take advantage of this with DJ Moore. He's averaging 10 targets per game and 88 receiving yards per game in the 3 games since Shane Waldron was fired. And Keenan Allen is also averaging 10 targets per game since the Waldron firing as well. So we can start playing Keenan Allen with a little bit more confidence moving forward, which is great to take advantage of this schedule throughout the fantasy playoffs. And he's kind of looked good. He's looked good over the last few weeks. Now, Rome Odunze is interesting. Rome Odunze is the 3rd wide receiver in Chicago. He only actually has 4 fewer targets than DJ Moore since the Shane Waldron firing. He's got 26 targets to DJ Moore's 30 in those 3 weeks. He's kind of a fringe play right now, but he's going to be a starter if anything happens to either DJ Moore or Keenan Allen. So I've been saying it all year. I hope it pays off at some point. Keep stashing Rome Odunze. That's a really good playoff schedule for him. Now, the 5th easiest schedule in the fantasy playoffs for the wide receiver position. Green Bay Packers, week 15 is the Seahawks, who are the 17th easiest matchup. The Saints, who are the 11th. And then the Vikings, who we just mentioned, they are the number 1 easiest matchup for the wide receiver position. Take advantage of this with Jaden Reed. Jaden Reed, clear number 1 wide receiver in Green Bay. He may be a little bit inconsistent. We know that. But just lean into that volatility, man. Lean into that volatility. He can provide week winning performances at any time. I know he can give you like a 3 at any time as well, but you're not going to win fantasy championships by being afraid of a guy like Jaden Reed. He could be the reason why you win one of these weeks. I'm looking at week 17 against the Vikings. He could do really, really well. He leads all NFL wide receivers in receptions of more than 20 yards so far this season. Now, going a little bit deeper, Christian Watson, he's kind of like a dart throw in deeper leagues in the hopes that he connects on a big play. He's kind of fringy, but if it comes down to a tiebreaker, maybe you want to play Christian Watson in one of these favorable matchups. Same with Romeo Dobbs. He's also a fringe wide receiver. Kind of has his moments here and there, but he's kind of he's even riskier, I think, than Christian Watson at this point. But he has very little upside on any given week. I'm probably not interested in playing Romeo Dobbs, despite the schedule.